Jeff Northrop asks, this is a good one. What are your thoughts on remakes, whether they be movies, games, studio remasters, homebrew, ROM hacks, or full-fledged overhauls? Have you found yourself to stick to the originals or more of a fan of the new? Great question, especially after E3 this year, because it was full of these amazing reboots and remakes. Final Fantasy VII, well, I'm looking at a list here. Fallout, there's going to be another Star Wars Battlefront, there's going to be a new Doom, Tomb Raider, so, and much, much more, right? How do I feel about that? Here's the thing I feel about all of those things, whether they're video games, movies, music, whatever. If you're going to try to remake something, it needs to be, well, okay, there's two things. There's remakes and then there's reboots. So if you're going to try to remake a game, it needs to be better than the original. Otherwise, don't even try, right? I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a couple examples of people who have remade a game, and I think they did a really good job. Let's start with the original Metroid. So Metroid on NES, classic, fantastic game, obviously, millions sold. And honestly, I wasn't really even looking for a remake until they made Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance. So this is kind of, again, this is, you could almost make the argument this is a reboot, remake, remaster, whatever. But this is a fantastic version of the original Metroid. They basically upgraded the graphics to more Super Nintendo. They also added new levels. I haven't played it in so long, but I think there's also new weapon types, all sorts of stuff like that. So they took that original and they made it better. And this is the version I like to play. I love this game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Another example, actually, I mentioned it, is Tomb Raider. So here's the original Tomb Raider, right? I played this when it first came out. It blew me away. As a matter of fact, at the time, at Sierra, we were getting into the hardware business and we made a 3D accelerator called the Screamin' 3D. It was a rendition video card. And so at the time when this came out, you could apply the rendition patch to this and it would use the 3D accelerator to smooth out the textures and also make the polygons much better. Fantastic game. But it wasn't perfect, right? Because at the time, we really hadn't worked out controllers, like controlling 3D characters on the screen. So the original had those kind of tank controls, really, really annoying. But we didn't know at the time, right? It was an amazing game. Then comes Tomb Raider Anniversary. So what year did this come out? I want to say 2007. So here is a remake of the original game for the PlayStation 2, and this is a really good remake of the original game. They upgraded the graphics to the PlayStation 2, obviously. They also really improved the control scheme. So again, this is a more modern control scheme, and to modern players like us, it's way more easier to get into. Honestly, if someone was to ask me if they're younger, which one should they play, I'd be like, play this one. This is a fantastic remake of the original. This is a great game, don't get me wrong. Like, I have it on the PC and also the PlayStation 1, but this is a great remake and it's fantastic. But then they rebooted it, right? Then they created Tomb Raider for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and they basically went back and reimagined the early life of Lara Croft. And again, this is great. It's like, it didn't try to be a remake, it was a reboot. It's like, okay, let's rethink all this. How can we retell that story in a new way? And again, I was really happy with this. I mean, I was skeptical at first. I was like, I don't know. But I think it needed to be done, you know? I'm really happy with it. Same thing with some movies. The one that comes to mind is the Star Trek reboot. I thought it was really great. They acknowledged the old universe and also had this fresh energy to that franchise. So, but then you also asked about music. This has been a little bit of a sticking point for me lately because I've recently gotten into Spotify. And it's interesting because some old albums have been remastered or remade by these old bands. And I understand why they do that, but basically they take these old songs and they create them new for today. Now, the reason why they do that, and I understand, is because they don't own the master recordings of those old songs. And so essentially these record labels own the masters, and so they just keep re-releasing it on new formats like digital and streaming, and the artist gets a fraction of that royalty. And that seems unfair, especially after 30 or 40 years. So what they do is they go back into the studio and they try to recreate the magic. But it often just does not work for me. You know, some of my favorite albums are part of my DNA. They're part of my history. And I know every single note. I know every guitar lick. I know every little thing, you know, about it. And then when I go and I listen to like a newer remastered version of it, it sounds like a cover band. It sounds like someone's trying to go, oh, you know, here's a new version of your childhood, and I hope you don't notice. Well, I notice, right? It's not the same. I get it. I understand why they do it. I just don't like it. And so that can be one thing where I'm like, oh, man, it's like it's hard to go back. You know, you're not as young as you were. You don't play it quite the same way. Although that said, I know I'm babbling here, but the one remake I would recommend to people, if you're interested in that, is the one, I was surprised, by ELO. So Electric Light Orchestra. If you're on Spotify or you're on iTunes or whatever, check out the remastered version of the greatest hits of ELO. I don't know how Jeff Lynne did it, but he actually made those songs better than the originals. Probably because he didn't lose his voice, and he's such a master at production. But that was one remake of original 70s music that actually is probably better than the original. So anyways, long story short, great question. This question was asked by one of my Patreon contributors who also helps support my YouTube channel and videos. I want to thank you very much. In addition to being able to ask me questions like this in a private message board, you also get early access to all of my videos and some other really cool perks. If you're interested in checking that out, please go to patreon.com/MetalJesusRocks.